This is William Gwynn's Biology 110 Global Water Crisis Project. The country I chose was Bahrain. So I will be discussing the key differences between the water quality in Bahrain and the United States. Some of the topics I'll cover are background of water sanitation requirements between the two countries, the current water quality in the two countries, some causes for that reduced water quality in the United States and Bahrain, some effects of the reduced water quality, diseases, possible conditions that are caused from dirty water. I kind of included in the effects of reduced water quality, and then end with possible solutions for reduced water quality between the two countries. So, as you can see, this is a chart. This is the standard for drinking water in Bahrain. As you can see, there are 9 categories. The 9 categories with guideline numbers in the last two columns on the right. Compared to the U.S., Bahrain has about 10% of the requirements. So the U.S. actually has 90 categories, with Bahrain only having 9. So you can see that their parameters they're really testing for are color. They're looking, at the color of the water. They're checking or they're looking at the taste of the water, how the water smells or the odor, the temperature of the water, the turbidity, meaning, if it has any solids in it or not, the chlorine for residual, right? They're also checking for the pH, the conductivity, and the total dissolved solids. As you can see, most of them are, unobjectable or not mentioned as far as the guidelines. Yep. So moving on to the background for the United States water sanitation requirements. Basically, under the Safe Drinking Water Act created in 1974, it has been amended several times throughout the years. So basically, the EPA is going to be the one setting the standards, monitoring, and protecting the U.S. water quality. The EPA is, the governing body over that. And the treatment requirements are for over 90 contaminants. Obviously, with time restraints, I can't list all 90, but some of them are turbidity, checks for viruses, coliform, and heterotropic plate count. So when we're talking about current water quality, obviously the world is going to be affected by this. So water pollution occurs from any harmful substance that gets into our fresh water supply. Basically, it takes effect on the quality, making it toxic for our human consumption. Um, so there is an issue worldwide with water population, or about 80% of the world's wastewater is sent untreated to the freshwater supplies, meaning, rivers, streams, underground aquifers, stuff like that. Not only is this an issue in finding clean water, but the supplies are getting more and more scarce. So those underground water aquifers are getting more and more scarce. Um, and not only is this an issue for humans and drinking water and such, but also wildlife is suffering. Vegetation, animals, fish, obviously. So, and then here are the two countries separated out. So in the United States, tap water supplies are, considered to be the safest in the world, but we are not perfect. Some issues could be from poorly treated distribution centers, basically the piping systems, basically the way we get fresh water here in the United States, or drinking water. Those pipes and stuff can be contaminated. They could be rusted, corroded, broken. Dirt can be getting in there. That could not be safe. Um, Water pollution from chemicals being dumped untreated into U.S. freshwater supplies. Obviously that's happening with different industrial and manufacturing processes. And Bahrain, basically, 95% of the country is connected to a centralized sewage network. Sanitation efforts are very outdated and inadequate for the amount of people. And basically, they are trying to convert ocean or seawater, or basically salt water, into usable drinking water. And that process, called desalination, is very bad for the environment. Obviously, it takes its toll on the environment. So, for example, in the U.S., one of the major, water quality issues we've had recently, within the last 10 years, is Flint, Michigan. Basically, the Flint River was the source of, dumped, treated, and untreated waste by local industries, whether that be car manufacturer, farms, different processes. Um, you know, the local government decided that, they needed to save money. They were in a huge deficit. So they sent in an emergency management official, and he thought that changing their water supply from Lake Huron to the Flint River would save them a lot of money. Very poor decision from the local government, and basically mismanagement of water quality testing. And the citizens started to get sick. More and more, they developed skin rashes. They started smelling foul water. The water tasted weird. Um, there was elevated lead levels whenever the children were getting tested. Um, Basically, lead was the biggest culprit in the issue with the citizens. But this caused a huge scandal, and this is one of the major ones from the U.S. recently. So, some causes of reduced water quality, worldwide issues. Basically, water is known as a universal solvent, meaning that water can dissolve into a multitude of, or different chemicals, and substances can be dissolved into water. It's easily polluted. Main causes could be industry, farms, towns, basically releasing toxic or harmful substances into our freshwater supply. They basically, these industries dump, or, farms and stuff have runoff, and it gets into our water supply, and they don't really think about the consequences. Agriculture and farming is at the top of the list for water pollution, leading, they're obviously leading in water degradation, and they're also the top source of contamination in rivers and streams, basically through their fertilizers and their pesticides running off during rain into those different supplies. When we're talking about, splitting the U.S. and Bahrain, talking about the two countries individually, farming and agriculture in the U.S. produces runoff. Manufacturing and industries produce wastewater and toxic substances. Oil spills in the oceans and on land could contaminate or does contaminate water supplies. And then radioactive substances accidentally getting released through cleanup processes. And in Bahrain, their population is booming. The rising population, basically, more wastewater is being produced. After the Gulf War, oil pollution has caused serious issues for their natural groundwater reservoirs. Industrial processes releasing toxic substances into their groundwater. And then they have basically have no rivers, very low rainfall every year. And so that's also affecting the freshwater supply of the country. So the effects of reduced, water quality, as we saw in Flint, Michigan, water pollution takes its toll on people in the region. This is the same across the world. Some health effects could include, gastrointestinal illnesses, nervous system or reproductive effects, chronic diseases like cancer, um, and water can also carry some disease causing microbes, right? These two are rare: typhoid fever and chlorea. But most common illnesses include stomach pain, diarrhea, fever, vomiting, headaches, or kidney failure. So, some of the possible solutions for reduced water quality, as individuals, we can reduce, reuse, and recycle our plastic consumption. When we're getting rid of chemicals, oil, or some non-degradable substances, make sure we're just disposing of them properly. Make sure they don't just end up down our drains or just pour them outside. And then ensure that, leaks on our vehicles are not happening. Oil, antifreeze, different transmission oil, stuff like that. So for the U.S. and countries around the world, basically the higher levels are going to have to limit the amount of contaminants industries and manufacturing processes are putting off. They're going to have to set standards so that they're not overly contaminating the fresh drinking water supply. Obviously build treatment plants for wastewater, to ensure clean drinking water, set standards for disposing and dumping of toxic substances, and then desalination is, obviously a taxing process for the environment, but it can take salt water and clean it to produce clean drinking water. We have a lot of salt water around the world. And this is where I, got all my sources from.